for this to be possible. This is the house of the people. You will always be welcome here. All the ideas, all the proposals, for them to be debated, to be heard, to be in agreement or not. That's the nature of the Chamber of Deputies. Thank you a lot to everyone. Good night.
That was a very interesting second hearing, and there were some differences between the first one that we received and this one. Obviously, in this case, we received a lot more scientists and researchers. We got biologists, radiologists, a criminalistic expert, researchers, scientists, forensic scientists. We even got a Mexican singer as well to add to that little mix. We also got a Peruvian lawyer as well, and someone that worked for the Mexican air traffic control. So it was a big batch of a lot of people, and in this case, they weren't necessarily sharing experiences. Yes, Jesus Angel, the Mexican air traffic controller, did. But as for the rest of them, they were providing data. They were saying, based off of my research, I found this, this, and this. And if you noticed, almost all of them, if not all of them, stated this is not multiple things created into one. This is one entity. We're not saying it's extraterrestrial, but it's definitely non-human. And I think that was one big takeaway from a handful. But Jimmy, what about yourself? There were a few moments that you were showing some pretty strong facial expressions. What was your overall take on this hearing?
Well, I love data. And I love the woo, but I need the science, for me personally, I need the science to support the woo. And certainly we got a big dose of black and white today. We got a lot of stats, a lot of images, and you're right, though. The overarching presentation was that these were not manufactured. That's it. So they did their best. It was very compelling. It was a very strong presentation to put that part of the debate and the argument to bed. Right. And I think they did a very effective presentation. There are going to be those out there that, or this isn't good enough, and there's going to be others out there that are going, what? Wow. So there is that. There were many moments where I was stopped in my tracks. And the heel bone part was fascinating. The jaw structure was fascinating. The thickness of the skulls compared to humans was fascinating. The DNA evidence and that part of the presentation was extremely compelling. And I mean, overall, and then we get to the idea presented here that 1,000 years ago, okay, now I'm going to circle back to this 1,000 year number is important, but that 1,000 years ago, hybrid chimps and hybrid apes were created, right? And not today, 1,000 years ago, were created and then combined with human DNA. Now, if I understood the presentation correctly, and I believe that I did, that is insanity. Okay, this is 1,000 years ago. And what was said was that, we can sort of do this today, but it's still an experimental phase. What we clearly have here is a hybrid chimp, hybrid ape from Africa. By the way, these mummies are from Peru, from Africa, and then combined with humans. That was pretty crazy. And then there was one other point where I was completely blown away, and that was that the chest plate was not solid, right? That it was hollow. and made of one of the rarest metals on Earth, number one. And number two, that it was created 1,000 years ago. That's pretty bizarre. And then the third part of that was that the human or the tissue had fused with it. And they used an example of a titanium screw from dentures, right? And how bone fuses with the titanium screw. And they're showing the metal plate and how it had fused 1,000 years ago, right? With the metal and the tissue from the mummy. That's and so what there's so much more to go into here, but even if we just stop right there, I made a comment. Now, I watched most of the presentation full screen. Okay, so I wasn't watching the chat room or anything. I was so into what I was seeing there. So I was watching everything full screen. But when I did jump back into the chat, I had this thought pop in my head. We have all of these universities in Central and South America that are looking into this. Now we need to bring in, obviously, more independent research, but we need Harvard, we need Johns Hopkins, we need Stanford, and different laboratories across the United States and the world to go ahead and get tissue samples, do their own CT scans, do their own X-rays, and see what conclusions that they can come to. And I think that's where we are at. It was a very compelling presentation. The whole world can watch this. And for those scientists out there, those biologists, those anthropologists, even physicists, right? And because we're talking about metals and elements and things, to go and do their own lab testing and see what the data presents. And I think that's where we are today, Cristina. Very compelling.
When it comes to the university aspect, there were some name bombs, one of them being the Inca University, to the point where they even interviewed the president of the university to talk about it. And I felt that was very compelling because he is putting his reputation and the university's reputation on the line to comment on it. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And I think that was very significant. Of course, we got all of these interesting scientists and those with pretty heavy credentials behind them to comment, but to have a university president, that's a whole different ballgame. Why? Well, because one, universities, there's a different kind of entity that you're dealing with. So I found that compelling. But more on a different note is there was one person in particular that wasn't following the thought process of everyone else. All the other scientists were saying it's about 1,000 or so years old. It's from Peru. And then we heard some stating, well, it might be a hybrid with a chimpanzee and a bono, one of those monkeys, right? But then we heard from one scientist from Argentina by the name of Dr. Celestino Piotti. I love that last name, by the way. And he says, nope, they're from the future. Using scientific method, they're from the future. And I was like, I don't think those two things fit in the same sentence. That's interesting. I want to understand why you think that. And then Jaime asks, okay, well, why do you think this? And he says, well, scientific method doesn't allow me to go any further. So I'm just going to stop talking and digest what I just said. And I was like, okay. That was a turn for the books. It really was. But he did make a really fantastic point that other scientists didn't, but that it needs to be mentioned. And he said, if you don't use scientific method and you just make an opinion based off of what you see but without doing any tests, it's very dangerous to society, because then with the words that you put out, it's going to affect how other people react to it if they want to conduct their own research. And that was something that I was like, yes, I'm so happy you're mentioning that, because words do have a lot of power. And I when he had mentioned, it's us, it's aliens I think it was us from the future. I believe what he said. I giggled a little bit because I saw your reaction. You almost fell out of your chair.
Well,
I giggled a little bit.
Well, listen, it's because Peyote, and I think I jumped in and I forget exactly what I said at that moment about him, but he was a scientist just presenting the science, and the science showed him, and he brought up Darwin. And so he said, he didn't necessarily say, he didn't mean like from the future, like time travel. What he was suggesting was this was a species that we humans may eventually evolve into. Right. So that's and to say that, to come to those kinds of conclusions, that's an amazing thing for a scientist to say. Well, he's looking at this and he's saying to himself, well, this is an example of what we could be, of what we may be. And I think what he was trying to say is that this species could how do I say this? I don't want to use the word, combine with us to create another new species, and that this is, if we were allowed to evolve on our own, we would evolve into this, and this is a future example of what we could be. I think that's what he was trying to say. I don't think he was implying, right, that this was us from the future coming back to visit us and then died while we were time traveling backwards. I don't think that's what he was saying. What he was saying is that this is what we would evolve into, and that Darwin has laid out examples of millions and millions of years of evolution to get to the point of where these mummies are now. So, or were then 1,000 years ago. I think that's what he was saying. I'll leave it to others. There's a lot to digest here. I'll leave it to others to interpret and understand what he was saying. But that's the way that I heard it.
And I'm glad that you cleared that up, because there's probably a lot of mixed thoughts and emotions there. Also, we have to give a big thanks to the translators. Translating is not easy when you're doing it in real time, because when it comes to any language, the sentence structure is different, and you have to mentally put it back into the right puzzle pieces, make it into the proper sentence, and then provide it as fast as you can. I've attempted to do Spanish translations in the past, and it's really, really difficult. So even though people were complaining about a few of them, they were doing their absolute best.
I mean, compared to the last presentation,
that's true.
I was completely focused. Now, for those of you that jumped in halfway through, 3/4 through, this started promptly at 2. It's now 5:46. So it's 3 hours, about 3 hours and 45 minutes long. Absolutely 100% worth it. Go back, start from the beginning, because they came out firing on all cylinders from the beginning, and it was back to back to back to back to back to back. So go and watch this from the beginning so you can see the data and how it was presented. It was strong. I'm brain dead. I've got Fade to Black to do in an hour. And wow. I mean, I'm very rarely, I had to get up twice. 3 times. I had to get up, 4 times. I had 5 times. It was 4 hours. I had a couple of deliveries that came, but and I had to visit the facilities. And then it was like a movie. I needed munchies. I was just compelled. I could not stop watching and listening. It was insane to keep my attention like that for 3 hours and 45 minutes. It was that good, Christina. It was very compelling. Now, am I on the other side of the fence? Let me put it to you this way. if I was a debunker right now, if I was, one of those skeptics that if I was a Michael Shermer, Mick West type, I've got a lot of work to do to counteract and to argue and to debate what was just presented. It's but was it enough to push me onto the other side about these mummies? I'm pretty comfortable in saying that we've got to move forward. I'm not throwing this in the trash going, nothing to see here. We're moving on. No, I don't think that is the case. I think that they laid it out very, very effectively. And now I think it's the rest of the world's turn to grab a hold of this and we need other brains on this. We need other eyes on this. We need other thought, other theories about what is actually going on here. And this is an opportunity to do just that. And I think that's the next move.
And yet again with this presentation, because we heard it in the last one as well, there was an open invitation for scientists and researchers to conduct their own research. And that is the biggest thing. When you open that door, when you provide, in a sense, that invitation, it allows other people to make their own conclusions. But when you are judging from the sidelines without putting in the work, your opinion is not as valid as those that are getting their knees and elbows dirty and doing the hard, difficult work. This isn't easy. Doing these scans take a lot of time, take a lot of money, and it take a lot of expertise as well. And I think one thing that is probably confusing a lot of people is that we're still hearing two sides, and we will continue after today, after this second public hearing. Those that say it was assembled, here's a video, here's some paperwork on it. And then you have this new camp now that's stating, well, we've had so many scientists, we've written our own peer-reviewed papers, and here is our data, and it's public. And on top of that, you have an open invitation to look at it as well. And no matter what topic you cover in any field in life, you're going to have two camps, those that agree and those that disagree. Jimmy, we are not here to tell people to believe one side or the other, but instead to make up your own mind on what you think is actually going on. But something that we have to ask ourselves is, was this presentation, was this data compelling enough to either make us ask bigger and better questions or to drop it as a whole?
Did you just hear those voices?
No.
Did anybody in the chat room hear what I just heard? I mean, I just heard it's not coming from here. Yeah. They heard it too. That was pretty strange. You didn't hear that, Cristina? Okay, all right. I'm not gonna hear now. Here's the thing. All right. When you have somebody, I just mentioned Mick West and Michael Shermer and the likes of those. Now, the skeptic world, the world of skeptics is tiny. Okay. There's millions of experiencers. There's only one Mick West, right? There's only one Michael Shermer, and they hang out with a half a dozen other skeptics, and that's it, right, in the world. That's it. But they're also very, very loud, and they like to debate and start a discussion for sport. They know probably that they're not right, but they do this for exercise. And I get that. I totally get that. And we need those kinds of voices to keep us centered. All right. You've got to stay centered. You can't jump into the deep end of the pool. And it's not like after an effective presentation that we just watched that I'm coming on with you right now going, no, man, aliens are real. That's all we needed. That was it. That was perfect. That's it. We can now move. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. Okay. But somebody like Mick West, who I like the guy. He's a nice guy. He really is. He's a pain in the booty sometimes, but he's fun to debate with. He's absolutely fun. It exercises my brain too. But in this case, and if somebody like him or Mick himself is going to watch this and try to take notes and try to counteract some of this, that's a tough road. That's a tough road. So now we need to open it up to the academics. I did see somebody put in the chat earlier, one of those Mick West types said, I didn't see any data. I was like, what did you watch? That was 3 hours and 45 minutes of x-rays, of CT scans, of analysis, of data, of lab testing. What from scientists? What do you mean you didn't see any data? I saw too much. It was overwhelming. And I am going to watch this again. I'm going to take some notes and see where we are at. Tonight on Fade to Black, Christina, I'm doing a show about ghosts and haunted Nevada. How do I go from this presentation and spin my head around and go and jump into ghosts? But I'm somehow going to pull that off. I do want to remind everybody that two things are about to happen. One, I'm going to be in Vegas this weekend at Stairway to the Stars. Everybody knows that. And one of the scientists, one of the participants in the Navy CT scans and X-ray analysis that was done on the two mummies last month is going to be with us in Las Vegas. And I am going to see some of the physical evidence. I don't want to get into details on what that is for legal reasons. So I'm just going to stay right there for now. But I'm going to be able to see this stuff for myself. And then right after that, the next day, I fly to Peru. Okay, so I'm going to be in Peru, and I will collect all the knowledge that I can. I'm going to be shooting the entire time that I am there, and then I'll be back at the end of November with the full report for everybody. So strange timing on all of this. I'm hanging out with the right people. I'm going to the right countries, and I'm going to try to figure this out and get answers for everybody. So there you go.
And that's exactly what we want. Before we end today's show, I would like to mention that there will be a timeline index in the YouTube description of when everyone spoke, when videos were shown, and so forth. So to help you follow along with this very long presentation, about 3.5 hours, you'll be able to see who is speaking and also their credentials as well. But that is it for today. Thank you for everyone tuning in, watching it through.